What is up, my fearless networking friends? Todd Falcone here. Welcome back to another episode. Kind of a funny title, Why I Use My Lips and Not My Fingers. I'm sure people are like, what the hell are you talking about in this post in terms of the content or the subject matter? I promise it is G-rated, but I think it's an important thing to bring up, and I'm deadly serious when I say why I prefer to use my lips. That means my mouth, my words, my vocal cords, when it comes to prospecting in network marketing rather than my fingers on a keyboard, okay? Not at all against the whole concept or the idea of having a conversation back and forth, whether I'm text messaging you back and forth or whether I'm DMing you on Instagram or whether we're having a Facebook Messenger conversation. Those are all great things to do. But here's the thing that's lost in translation. And I think some of you have probably experienced this or realized this, but think about this for a second. You're having a conversation with somebody via text or back and forth on Facebook Messenger or on email, for example, and somebody misreads what you said. And you said these words, but they interpreted those words differently than you intended for them to be interpreted. And so why did that happen? Well, the problem is, like, we don't have inflection, volume changes up and down. We can't express ourselves or put, a particular, focus on a word that we're using when we're talking to someone via text. And, you can, in some cases, you can bold and you can underline and you can italicize and you can do some of those things. But a lot of the texting platforms, we really can't do that. It's just straight words. Maybe you can do all caps or something like that. But still, there are things that are lost in translation. And I mean, many of you, I'm sure, have had an experience where somebody gets pissed off, or they're mad, or they're upset, or they misunderstood, or they're like, whatever. So, there's something, and you're like, what's up? What happened? And you're like, oh, you said this. Well, yeah, I said this, but this is what I meant when I said it. And because you weren't able to kind of change, if you will, the expression or the way it was meant to be said, or the way you intended it to be said, it was misread. Now, granted, people can misread things that we say to them verbally, but it's less likely to be misunderstood. So when it comes to, again, I mean, I'll have conversations back and forth with somebody for sure. I have many of them. I have hundreds of them on text message, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on direct messaging people on Instagram. Those are all great. Most of those conversations for me are shorter. And then if I'm getting into a lengthier conversation, or I'm ultimately wanting to do business with that person, I will do one of two things. One, and this is my personal preference, I'll take it to the phone. Somebody in one of my coaching groups the other day asked me, well, how do you take it to the phone? Well, I'd simply say, Chris, here's my phone number, 206, blah, 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 blah. What's yours? And I've never had somebody not give me their phone number, because the law of reciprocation is pretty interesting. It's weird in life. Like, if you do something for somebody, they feel an obligation to return that in kind to you. And there's actually a really good book that I wasn't really intending on bringing this up in this particular episode, but there's a book by Robert, I don't know how you pronounce his name, Cialdini or Cialdini, it's Cialdini, and it's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And he talks about the law of reciprocation as one of the many laws and many things when it comes to persuasion. But that's kind of how it works. So if I want to take that conversation, that Facebook Messenger chat, for example, or that text conversation, I mean, if it's a text conversation, clearly I already have the person's phone number because we're texting back and forth on the phone. But if it's on Instagram, or if it's on LinkedIn, or if it's on Facebook, or anything else for that matter where I don't have the person's phone number, and we're going back and forth. And also, I personally, for me, if we go back and forth a little bit, that's fine. But if it's this, if this conversation is like kind of going on and on, I'm like, I'd rather pick up the phone and, have a conversation with you. That's me. That's probably my demographics too. Somebody who's younger can probably sit there for hours and text back and forth. But I kind of prefer, especially when it comes to doing business and having, the opportunity for us to be on the same page, to be able to have a conversation. So again, one of two things. One, it will be literally getting on the phone with them. And if I don't have their phone number, it's an easy way to get their phone number. I think it's a smart thing to do, by the way, as well, because we don't own any of these social media platforms. So if for some reason you got booted off of Instagram, or like a friend of mine got booted off of LinkedIn, I think he got booted off permanently, actually, recently. And, now he has no access to those people. But if he had their phone numbers, he could still maintain communication with them. So it serves a couple of purposes. One, now you've got their data. Now you've got their information where you can actually communicate with them outside of that platform. And number two, you're creating an opportunity to have more of an interactive, ongoing conversation. The second thing, and if you prefer to do this, this is fine. I think you're missing out on the fact that now you're not going to be able to get their contact information, is I will use like voice shots, for example, on text, or I'll do it on Facebook. I'd much rather have you hear my voice in our conversation that we're going back and forth on Facebook or on text than I would just simply typing. Some people do it out of convenience because they're driving, for example, and I think it's obviously not smart to text and drive. So they'll, do a voice shot while they're driving, or maybe even if they're not driving, they'll do a voice shot. But then what happens is, because they're able to hear the speed, the tone, the undulation in your voice, all these different things, it's easier to understand. And when I was, for example, studying NLP many years ago, and I don't know if I'm going to remember the exact percentages, but communication is only like 7% the words that we use. The other part of it is like body language, your gestures, for example. I know I'm not really gesturing properly like this, and those of you who listen to me on audio and podcasts, you're like, what gestures? What are you talking about? Right? So the other thing is, like, for some of you guys are catching me on my podcast, and it's only on audio. So there's things that you're missing because you're just hearing the vocal part of it. So when you can be in front of a person, and I actually even prefer this for long distance communication, now that we have things like Zoom or FaceTime. Not everybody has an iPhone, so not everybody can FaceTime, but with Zoom, you could pop onto a Zoom with somebody clear across the planet. They can see you. They can hear you. You can actually have eye contact with that person, and they're somewhere, clear across the world. I mean, technology today is amazing, but there are so many things that are lost in translation, and there are lots and lots of misunderstandings that I've personally seen take place when it's just, texting back and forth, because they're just missing elements to the entire communication equation. So something to think about. I know it's kind of a weird title for today's blog post, but that's okay. We'll deal with it. So anyhow, wherever you are, love you, appreciate you. If you're on my YouTube channel, appreciate my YouTubers, appreciate you guys on my podcast as well. The rest of the details on this episode and all the other episodes that we've been doing on this Prospecting Mastery series are right here at toddfalcone.com/episode 182. TODDFALCONE.com/episode 182. We'll see you next time.